Committee.
Mr Speaker.
Call Kevin Haig.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. For at least the last 30 years, the alcohol and other drug treatment sector has been saying with a more or less unanimous voice that the Alcoholism and Drug Addiction Act 1966 has not been fit for purpose and needed to be replaced. So it's certainly with perhaps an overdue sense of welcome that I thank the Minister for his introduction of the bill today. Several other speakers have referred to the Law Commission's work, and I'm going to quote from the Law Commission's report on this matter. They became interested in this topic largely through their study, a very extensive study on controlling and regulating drugs and alcohol in our lives. What they said was that one of the most persistent themes from submitters and experts whom they dealt with during that inquiry was the need for robust and effective treatment services, which we often lack, sir. So one of the things they said when they followed up that work by specifically reviewing this act was this. One component of any coherent framework for delivering alcohol and drug treatment is the use of compulsion to require people to undertake treatment. Outside of the criminal justice system, the only provision for compulsory treatment specifically for dependents can be found in the Alcoholism and Drug Addiction Act 1966. That act is now outdated, and there are difficulties in reconciling the broad powers of detention with the rights and protections in the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990. Over the years, some provisions of the Act have also fallen into disuse, and the overall framework of the Act has not kept pace with subsequent changes in allied legislation, such as the Mental Health Compulsory Assessment and Treatment Act. Reform of the Act is long overdue. Hear, hear, Mr Speaker. The framework in the current Act, in fact, is in some ways more akin to punishment. It's as if legislators were confused about what they were attempting to do. And Mr Speaker, just as with other aspects of the legal framework that we use to regulate alcohol and other drugs, the Green Party believes that we need to move this framework from one that's based on justice and punishment through to one that's actually health-based. And certainly we welcome the emphasis that's in this bill on harm reduction, and we specifically welcome the fact that compulsory treatment will only be used if that is in the interest of reducing the harm to the person concerned. So, Mr Speaker, the framework that's set out in this bill is a very substantial step forward. The current Act is unwieldy and often inappropriate. Even in those circumstances where the current Act actually would be helpful, it is so hard to use that it often is not. And that, Mr Speaker, is the sign, I should think, of an Act of Parliament that is no longer fit for purpose. Change to it, or rather, as Peter Dunn has said, not change, but replacement of it, has been supported almost unanimously by the sector. It's also worth noting that it was a recommendation of the National Drug Policy Summit in August 2013 that was comprised of policymakers, treatment providers, as well as other stakeholders like the Principals Federation, the Police Association. Very many stakeholders in drug policy came together in Wellington and formed a consensus statement about the direction that drug policy should follow. One of its recommendations was that a replacement of this Act was one of the urgent priorities that government should undertake. I was reminded, Mr. Speaker, as I prepared for this contribution on this bill, of a singular day that I spent as the guest of one of the two alcohol and other drug treatment courts that are currently being trialled through the Auckland District Court. And under that approach, sir, what is happening is that offenders who are repeatedly in front of the courts for offending that is caused by or related to their alcohol or other drug use are instead offered treatment options under the jurisdiction of the court. And I was particularly struck by the very strongly client-centred approach that was being taken by the court. From the judge on down to every other participant in that process, the focus seemed to be on providing the best possible outcomes for that person, reducing their harm, leading them to the best outcomes that were possible. And in the afternoon, when I saw the offenders appearing before the court, and seeing the relationship that those offenders had with the court and with everyone concerned, I have never, and Mr. Speaker, I've been in many courts over the years, I've never come across such relationships before. They were genuinely therapeutic in nature. And Mr. Speaker, wouldn't it be great if we were able to augment the limited tools that those alcohol and other drug treatment courts have at their disposal, to give them another tool that was useful for them in actually achieving harm reduction for the people that they are trying to help? Wouldn't that be great, sir? Some of the speakers have raised some concerns around the bill that the Select Committee will need to take into account, and I'm particularly mindful of the very thoughtful contribution from Puto Williams. I thought that was an outstanding contribution to this debate. The Select Committee will need to look at whether the balance has been properly struck with the powers that exist in the bill that are necessarily still coercive, with the rights and freedoms that we have determined to be a necessary part of participation in society. And as Puto Williams has rightly pointed out, there are some examples, some of the use of ECT, the use of seclusion in some mental health facilities, or excessive use of seclusion, excessive use of restraint, where that balance has been struck in the wrong place. And indeed, resource constraints, as others have referred to, can lead to those techniques being more often used. And Mr. Speaker, that's something that the Select Committee is going to be interested in following up, I'm sure. There is debate, Mr. Speaker, about whether compulsory treatment is ever appropriate. There are some who believe that it is not. And I'm going to be very interested to hear the views of those submitters on the Select Committee, sir, to see whether we have that set right. David Clark is correct to point out that alcohol and other drug treatment services are currently struggling with resourcing. They have falling resourcing in real terms, increasing need that they need to service. Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, we'll be cutting off our nose to spite our face if we add to the arsenal of treatment services a useful tool, but actually we then hamstring those same services by under-resourcing them. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to properly resource them to maximise the value of this change that this bill would make. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say, wouldn't it be great if we actually took the action that was necessary to prevent harm as well as just to reduce it? And Mr. Speaker, I look forward to further action by this House to reduce the harm that can be caused by alcohol and other drug use in the bill that we are to debate following this. and in many others. Thank you, sir.